All right, we're recording. It's the Gateway API meeting for October 18, 2021. And huge thank you to everyone who made V1 Alpha 2 happen. That got released last week during KubeCon. Lots and lots of new changes in here, as we're probably all aware. But I'm just really excited to start seeing some implementations come out that are using and supporting V1 Alpha 2. And of course, any feedback associated with that will be really helpful. But yeah, just awesome to get this one out. And with that, I think it's time to get right back into kind of our next steps for the API. Yeah, so I think it's natural. We've released our second alpha API version. I think many of us are hoping that our next API version can be a beta API. So I wanted to come back to this beta graduation criteria. I think many of us were involved in the graduation criteria, deciding on this graduation criteria for getting to beta, but I know this is kind of out of band of Gateway API repository, so it may have gotten missed. But part of moving into the Kubernetes API group and becoming an official API is we had to, go through a CAP process like every other Kubernetes API. And most of the things in here were not relevant to us, but graduation criteria was relevant. So I wanted to highlight this, run through it with the people on this call and just make sure that this is something we're comfortable with. We don't want to propose any changes, etc. One, we want the APIs, V1 Alpha 2 APIs, to be implemented by several implementations. And maybe this should just say the latest alpha release, which we hope is V1 Alpha 2. We want the same kind of approval of sub-project owners plus KEP reviewers that we got for V1 Alpha 2. We put conformance tests as a blocker on beta. We want at least some conformance tests in place. We want the validating webhook ready to go. I guess we didn't actually say it needs to be used, but I think that is maybe implied here. And then finally, we want users to actually be using this API and deploying apps with it. This stops short of saying that it needs to be used in production, but it needs to be used by users that aren't just the implementers of the API. Yeah, that's the list right now. Does anyone think of anything? Can anyone think of anything we should add to this list or change in this list that we really want to have in place before we got to beta?
He's asking for any kind of production usage part of alpha by any chance, or not really?
That's a good question. I think it's difficult to ask for that because I know, at least with GKE, and I guess every product is different, but it's hard for us to ship a project that we call production ready without a non-alpha API. Or it's challenging. I don't know. Maybe it's I don't know the ins and outs here, so I'd have to dig back into this. But it's hard to say. Usually when you say alpha API, you're not saying, "Oh, go use this in production tomorrow." Maybe my take on that is off. I'm interested in what other implementations are suggesting here. Are you, if you're supporting this API and you're supporting V1 Alpha 2, is the plan that, you recommend it for production use? I think it's a fairly stable API, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just want to call one thing here too, like on the EKS does not support any alpha API. So the EKS class only support beta API. So I think it's similar to GKE. If it's not beta, it's not going to support it in the production version, EKS cluster.
Yeah, that's good to hear. There's a similarity there.
Okay, so that's interesting. So if it's hard for, if it's cloud providers are not running alpha then. Okay. I mean, then I think the last bullet then really gets us much far away, where we want to make sure that most of the API surface has been exercised and by more humans, right? That gives some good validation here.
Yeah, I think you calling that out specifically, I think this is one of the most challenging, going to be one of the most challenging ones to get to a point where we have users that are actually using the entirety of the API service, or most of the API service, means that we actually have to have the API broadly implemented by at least one implementation. So, like I expect we're going to have a lot of implementations of the API that cover 80% of the API service. But getting that last little bit will probably be challenging. So I imagine this particular section is going to be the one that slows us down the most, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be by one implementation, right? Even
yeah,
like overall, if we are like, and if some narrow parts are missed out, that's probably okay from an API backwards compatibility thing. But I do agree that it is going to be very challenging. The API is broad enough. So
yeah. And this is what I've been thinking about as it's going to be very tempting to try and add concepts to API surface at this stage. We also have to recognize and be cautious, because as we add components to the API, we are basically lengthening the amount of time it takes us to get to beta. So we have to be rather selective in what we choose to try and add to the API at this point, based on this graduation criteria. At least that's my perspective. I don't know if anyone else has a different take on it. Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, thank you. So just a reminder, it's linked in here, but we have a cap associated with the Gateway API. And so if you're ever looking for what we're hoping to get into, to reach beta, that is it. Also, one of the things that I've been thinking about a fair amount as we finally got to V1 Alpha 2 approval, many of you who were involved in this process probably noticed that there was kind of a lot of back and forth of, it wasn't as efficient of a review process as I think many of us would have liked. We basically had two separate groups of reviewers. We had our own internal maintainers and then Kubernetes API reviewers, and it was somewhat challenging to manage the reviews between the two groups and get everyone on the same page. I don't have any solutions quite yet, but I'm starting to think of just ideas or ways we can maybe make this a little bit smoother in the future. So if anyone else has been thinking about this same problem, or ways to improve the release process, I'd be very interested. I don't have any great suggestions right now, but just throwing that out there. If anyone else has been thinking about this, I'd really appreciate thoughts, comments, whatever. And with that, let me keep on moving. Conformance tests. This is one of, I think, our biggest focuses has to be with V1 Alpha 2. That is, as I just mentioned, that is a requirement to get to beta, that we have at least some conformance tests in place. I took some notes that came from just a chat I had with Bowie a while ago now, just about how we might want to structure conformance tests. And this is really meant to be a starting point, a note stock. This is not formal in any sense, but I wanted to just throw it out there as a set of ideas we could maybe guide our discussion around conformance with. So ideally, if we have a conformance framework, the CLI should, again, run tests against any specified class in an existing cluster. And where we're starting to get into the trickiness of this kind of conformance testing is we're going to want or need a way to select extended features. because we know, okay, we can start with running conformance tests against everything we consider to be core and say, okay, well, everyone needs to support core. We can just focus on core conformance tests, and that's a good starting point. But when we start to get into extended feature sets, we're going to need some more thought and effort in this. I know Nick has separately mentioned that he's been thinking about the concept of conformance profiles. And that's really related to this. And that's the idea that at least my understanding of what a conformance profile would be is really just describing the features your gateway class supports. And that's something like we need to have a better answer around as we're trying to really provide this kind of extended conformance API. And then, also the other things we expect the CLI to be able to do, I think, are a little bit more straightforward. Listing conformance tests. Maybe we have categories. And then we need to output some kind of structured format so that we can generate reports and show conformance across different controllers, different implementations. And then, of course, finally, we have to keep this all in the context of ingress controller conformance, which is our ingress conformance test suite. That does things a different way. There's a PR that I have that started kind of based on that and shifts things a little bit. But we just need to keep that in mind. We either need to have a similar structure to what is already being done, or pull ingress along with us into whatever new direction we go. So I don't want to go through every little detail here. Everyone can read through this, but this is just a rough vision for what conformance testing could look like. I know others are thinking about this. I know obviously Nick has been putting some thought into conformance profiles, but if anyone else has opinions on how conformance tests should be structured, feedback is very welcome here. This is, again, just a start. I think this is something that we'll probably have to transition into a GET at some point, but just wanted to throw something out there while I had some rough notes thought process. Any thoughts or strong feelings about conformance testing structure? Anything along these lines?
I have questions.
Yeah.
Okay. If we, I'd say, for example, if we have two different kind of gateway class, one more like L7-ish, one L4-ish, we'll have two different kind of controller. How does it work? Does it mean if I only do L7, does that mean it's not conformed, or how does it work? If I just
that's a really good question, and that we've been so focused on L7, at least among current implementations, that we know that's a question out there, and that's something that really is something that lends itself to the idea of conformance profiles, and that's the idea that, okay, I am a implementation that supports this generic profile, and this is for all L7 concepts of the API, whereas I'm an implementation that supports only L4 concepts of the API. And we need a way to express that, because what you're describing, I think, is going to be a common use case. I think we'll have a similar kind of differentiation for GKE. So I think what you're describing is going to be common, but we don't yet have a good way to express that, but that's definitely something we need. And I'm glad to hear that you're also thinking about these things. Cool. Anyone else have thoughts on conformance here? Does this match expectations?
The one item you've got there of be consistent with the ingress controller conformance tests. In what way are you thinking be consistent?
Yeah. So there has been some interaction between the two. what we're testing is largely similar. What we're trying to test between ingress controller conformance and gateway conformance is that YAML or some kind of Kubernetes manifests are applied, and I send requests to, give an endpoint and status on said resource, and it works as expected. That's a rough summary of what these conformance tests would cover in either case. So what we're trying to avoid is for these two sets of conformance tests to live in isolated bubbles that don't, that are completely different. There's many opportunities to share code, logic, whatever. I'm not saying that everything needs to be the same, but it would be a wasted opportunity if we let them live in their own completely unique bubbles without sharing any kind of the maintenance overhead. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think just maybe be a little more explicit in the statement then. Because I mean, it's like consistent is like, okay, it's consistent in the CLI, consistent in what,
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't clear on, what the point of the consistency was. So
yeah, good point. Yeah, let me do that. Yeah, I'll update that. Good point. Thanks.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that's enough for conformance. Unless anyone else has comments, I can move on from here. All right. Cool. So the new features that this is going to be a recap of last week, but the new features that we've talked about post V1 Alpha 2 are redirect and rewrite, L4 route matching, and route delegation and inclusion. I know that there are issues for all of them. This path rewrite and redirect gap is the only one I know of that is actually a gap right now. So it's the furthest along in the process. But I know we at least have tracking issues for the other ones. So this one, because I've already written a gap for it, I am very happy to just continue this along. This is really just more of a reminder that I think this is open for review again. I think we were close to consensus on this one. Just it didn't make the cut before V1 Alpha 2. So yeah, this one is close. If anyone wants to take another look at it, if you have opinions about rewrites and redirects, this is a gap that I think is going to be one of the first ones that we can get moving in this next cycle. The next two both have tracking issues, and I don't think anyone is actively pushing forward on either of these. We have ideas, we have discussions on GitHub, but there's a lot of people here, and I wanted to open this up. Is anyone interested in leading the efforts on either of these discussions? Does not mean that you need to do the whole thing, but if you just want to commit to pushing forward and making sure something gets in, whether it's route delegation, route matching, whatever it happens to be, if there's interest, it would be great to get more people involved.
I know Nick was kind of the driver with route delegation and inclusion, but I'd be happy to coordinate with him and help in that.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
You trying to get somebody to drive the L4?
Yeah.
I think I'll drive the L4. I can start on that.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. And then. Cool. Yeah. Okay. That's great. And I'll just add myself here. I can chat after with anyone here, but I think we just need to find the tracking issues here, and there's probably artifacts for both of these, either in discussion in there, or maybe I think there's probably docs associated with these. So if you want any help trying to pull any of that information up, I can find it. But yeah, great to have more people involved on these. Great. Okay. The last thing, we just have one issue that I noticed. If I missed anything else, let me know. But there's really only one issue that's come in. We've kind of been in a slow period as we've waited to get V1 Alpha 2 out the door. But the one issue that came in is created by me in this case, and it's how and when are we going to deprecate V1 Alpha 1? We hadn't been particularly clear on this. There's mixed opinions. Some saying that alphas don't really have any kind of deprecation guarantee, any kind of long-term support. Basically, the idea that you can deprecate them at any point and or remove them. I'm not sure. I think, Harry, you were more comfortable with waiting until we released another version of the API before removing V1 Alpha 1. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people have users. So with alpha, I think we can be, we can be less methodical. I don't know if that's the right word, but at least like with other versions, I think it's important to keep a version back around, because that helps with migrations. Mostly people take forever to migrate, and that's why I think having one, just keeping it around helps. Probably don't add to anything, but just for migration purposes it helps.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's fine to leave around for a while. I'm not sure the exact. I think one of the most natural points to remove it may be the next minor release. That next minor release may be alpha, maybe just another bump on V1 Alpha 2, maybe beta. I'm not sure what the next minor release is. But that may be the most natural thing. But I think it sounds like no one has any hesitation about formally announcing that V1 Alpha 1 is deprecated. The only question is deprecated and frozen. And the only question is when we formally remove that API version from the repo. And we will do that no sooner than 05.0. Does that sound fair?
I think so.
Okay. I'll move forward with at least that. And then when we get to 050, we can decide what we want to do.
Probably want to make sure that we've got several implementations that have moved to V1 Alpha 2 as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think the key is that because V1 Alpha 1, all our install instructions and whatever for V1 Alpha 1 are forever tied to V0.3.0 of our release. Like we have already frozen V1 Alpha 1, so I don't think leaving it in tree makes a significant difference in the sense that it's already, it's already frozen in time. And maybe even as more of a unique thing to V1 Alpha 1, because it's kind of in this different experimental API group, it unfortunately doesn't even benefit from any kind of conversion, automatic conversion to our newer API version. Unfortunately, it kind of lives in its unique world. So yeah, but I agree that that's definitely a reasonable thing to expect, that before we remove V1 Alpha 1, we at least need some implementations that are supporting V1 Alpha 2. Can't get too far ahead of what people are actually using and working with. Okay, I can summarize these points in here in this issue. Yeah, I think that's really all I had on for the meeting today. Did anyone have any other discussion points? Anything we should discuss today?
I just quickly, I mean, I think we talked a few weeks ago about, where do we go from here? And I think we've got a few things identified before we try to go to V1 beta. I'm assuming that we want to make the next release V1 beta. Is that kind of consistent with people's thinking? Are we going to go for an alpha 3?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would really, really love to avoid alpha 3. That's my hope and goal personally. I am very interested in getting to beta sooner than later, because like that, as we were mentioning earlier in the call for GKE, it's much easier to launch a product if we have a beta API as opposed to an alpha API. And I imagine we're not the only ones with this limitation. What we're doing right now, while the API is an alpha, is users can install the API and our controller will support it, but we ourselves will not install an alpha API into your cluster, kind of thing. And so we're obviously very much interested in getting to a beta. With that said, we also need to balance that there are some things in this graduation criteria that are just going to take time. So we can't, as much as I'd love to go to beta tomorrow, we do kind of need to wait for implementations to catch up and to really have users feedback on V1 Alpha 2. I think the only thing I can think of that would cause us to go to V1 Alpha 3 is if we get significant feedback that something like we did in V1 Alpha 2 is sufficiently wrong, broken, confusing, etc. And we need to make some kind of breaking change before we go to beta. I'm really hoping we didn't miss anything like that, but it is a possibility. I don't know.
How much? Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
How much time do you want to give for that feedback?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have anything concrete in mind. I think at a minimum we need to have users of at least a couple different implementations using V1 Alpha 2. And then I think at that point we can really get a better feel for when beta is possible in reality. Like it's hard to find that, it's like a chicken and egg problem here of you can't get tons of users until you launch, a stable product that people can use in production. But then, once you do that, you can't make the changes that you really want to make based on that feedback. So yeah, this unfortunate cycle. With that said, yeah, I feel like, and this is just me talking, without much thought here, but it seems reasonable to at least expect at least a couple implementations of this API, V1 Alpha 2 specifically, and some users and at least some basic feedback from those users on the API. And even if that feedback is, yeah, this is fine, I mean, that's great, but just some kind of feedback cycle. I don't think we need an exhaustive feedback loop here, but just some kind of verification that what we're doing is usable and people are actually using it.
Yeah, it seems to me just pick a date and say, this is the point when we need that feedback by, or else we're going to lock in a beta.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
So we've got these 3 items that we've identified as, for post V1 Alpha 2, to be working on here. Do we want to get these into beta, or are we happy to take V1 Alpha 2, see if we get any feedback, and if there's no feedback or nothing major, then push that directly to beta?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's 2 somewhat separate tracks here. I think we can at least discuss design for these without necessarily committing to getting them into V1 Alpha 2, without committing to a brand new release for that. But I think it's helpful to at least discuss the design around these. But I agree with, well, I guess you weren't saying this directly, but we don't necessarily need to get these into V1 Beta 1, and it's likely a faster path to V1 Beta 1 if we don't include new features. So need to find the right balance there. I'm not sure how tied we are to any one of these features. I know we have feature requests for all of them, but I guess it comes down to a prioritization of how quickly do we want to get to beta, or how much do we want to rush these features in? And I personally don't have a clear answer on that yet, but I would really be interested in what others in the community are thinking here as well.
I mean, right now we're just in the middle of implementing V1 Alpha 2, so like it's too early for me to give really good feedback on this. But if you gave me a date and said get it in by this, if it was a reasonable date, I would endeavor to do so.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, well, I think that's a very reasonable idea. I hate to put anyone on the spot, but if anyone were to give a month, not even a date, but just a rough month of what might be reasonable for that, any ideas out there?
February.
Okay.
Reasonable for what specifically, Rob?
Yeah, so basically, I think what Shane is describing here is, and what I was thinking, my interpretation of that anyways, is a month or a timeline where we need feedback on the API, and if we haven't received any suggestions for changes, or haven't addressed any kind of feedback by February, let's say, we are going to take the API and cut a beta based on that state of the API kind of thing. So February would relative timeline, but that lines up with timeline that I'd had in my head, January, February, like early next year, of pushing for a beta. I know we've got a large holiday season ahead of us, so it's going to be hard to get anything in end of year. But that's, again, roughly speaking, how I'd interpreted what you were saying, Shane.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of just trying to get people motivated right now, right? Because for all being real, if somebody came in March and was like, wait, there's this devastating thing, and we all agreed with it, I mean, but yeah, I think the idea is to try to just kind of put something in mind so that we can all kind of have a date in mind when we need to really be done thinking about how we're implementing as much as possible.
Yeah,
with obvious wiggle room for crazy stuff that might pop up.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to go later than February.
Yeah,
my main thing was like the holiday season, just kind of give it some buffer.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll be releasing our first take of the V1 Alpha 2 November 15th, and we'll have all the L7 stuff at that point. So
yeah, that's great, and I think that from the little bits I've heard here and there, it seems like a lot of implementations are going to be coming out in November for V1 Alpha 2. So I think we will get some good feedback coming in that time frame. But then, if it's mid-November and then you've got Thanksgiving, etc., probably the earliest we could do anything substantial would be January, I think. So yeah, I agree that February, I really wouldn't want to go much past February. Maybe we can do a little bit earlier, but Yeah, let me spend some time thinking through exact timeline there, and it does sound like there's lots of interest in getting to beta, which is great to hear. And since that seems to be a pretty broad priority, I think we should prioritize that. And I can write something up maybe about really how we balance getting a new release out with the desire to talk about and work on these potential additions to the API.
I think that the thing that we need to recognize here is we've got actually quite a few implementations in process, or
Yeah.
in progress, if you will. And so we may not have a huge amount of end user feedback, but certainly as implementers, we've got a lot of us that are taking a look at this and looking at how to do it. So I think that's a pretty positive aspect to this, and I'd be really surprised if we get through this and go, oh man, there's something we really overlooked, or something that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
With all of us working on this at the same time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I really hope you're right. I've been really thrilled to have everyone working together on this, and I hope our combined efforts, that the end result is fairly straightforward to use, and we haven't missed anything too obvious in the process. Okay, well, hey, this is great discussion here. Let me work on some kind of doc here to just kind of summarize what we're thinking as far as timeline, and yeah. Thank you everyone for the discussion and ideas. Was there anything else we should discuss, or is that all for today?
Yeah, Rob,
Yeah.
is there any updates from the last week KubeCon meeting? Any, just curious, you guys are there, or any feedback from the SIG group or anything?
Yeah, I'm not aware. I actually wasn't at KubeCon in person. I know Gateway API was mentioned in at least one keynote, and it was mentioned in, of course, the SIG network deep dive and overview that happens every session. So I know it was mentioned, and I know we seem to get some more interest, but I don't know much beyond that from KubeCon. So I don't know if anyone else was actually at KubeCon or had any additional insight there. Okay, well, yeah, but it's cool to see the increased attention and interest in Gateway API, and I didn't even know that we were going to be mentioned in a keynote, but happy to see the project getting a little bit more attention as we go. Yeah, anything else we should discuss? Cool. all right, well, thank you everyone. This has been very helpful, and we'll talk again next week. Have a good one.